All right, well, we'll dive in. I'm sure people will join as they join, but how can I be helpful? Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Not all at once as usual.
Are there any wrong times to call people or call them at their office rather than their home?
Are there any wrong times to call people? I don't know. That's a good question. I think, always err on the side of being considerate, I suppose. I like to personally send a text message if I'm going to be doing any kind of cold outreach, send a text message the night before, give people the option of the morning or the afternoon, just so that there's some feeling of having space in there. Who were you calling specifically?
These would be cold leads. Like I'll get cold leads for an expired or something, and then may not have a good phone number for them at their home. So I'll look them up and try to catch them at the office.
Sure.
Cold leads trying to prospect.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a problem there. I think there's just a fine line between being persistent and then being, not being considerate of what they've got going on. And I think there's nothing wrong with reaching out and saying, hey, my goal here is to chat with you about something that's going to be very important to you, but at a time that's convenient for you. So given that I don't have your personal home number or your cell number, or whatever the case may be, what is that information and when's a good time that we can chat, right? And then you give them the space. And if they're say, buzz off, then okay, fine. Then you come back and say, listen, I'd love to send you some information. Is there an email address that maybe I could send it to? And I'll follow up with you in a couple of weeks just to see if it's of interest, right? Something like that. Great question. Thank you very much, Lee. I appreciate it.
Hey, Stephen, I have a question for you. This
Sure.
is Henry. So obviously there's kind of the basic prospecting for expireds and withdrawals, things that are happening as you're checking back from the last few days, last week, but kind of starting a project of going back in time and investigating, say, expireds and withdrawals from 2-3 years back, what have you. What's some basic criteria to not overwhelm myself with collecting too much data and then just not knowing where to get going because you just have so much in front of you?
So
I'm gonna say that's a great question.
Yeah. What's your desired outcome? What's your goal?
So I think my desired outcome is that the group of agents who are active, like they're on it every day, they're getting, FSBOs, expired, withdrawn. Those people are calling. Sellers are getting 10, 20, 30 calls. They're overwhelmed. I'm looking at investigating, and even if it takes a little bit more time to research, say 3 years ago, there's 50 expired listings. You could do a quick printout to show you if any of those have sold. You eliminate those, you're left with 35. You want to prospect those. But that's just in one area. What would you say is a number you should start with in terms of collecting a number of records that you can either skip trace or send out mailers or attempt to make phone calls to as well?
Yeah, I really think that's a great question, and it's going to vary market by market. I also think it's important to look at why they expired. And so for me, when it comes to, I know that there are people that, and I'm going to just throw my hands up and say, this is not my particular area of expertise. So take this with a grain of salt. And if there's anybody to call that this is their particular area of expertise, or they've built their entire business off of FSBOs and expireds, please feel free to jump in. I think, two heads are better than one at all times. So, with regards to that, I would look at your contact rate. So, and for me, I'm gonna say add as many and filter down as possible in order for you to get quality contact, right? So, and I think that's really where, I don't know if that answers your question, or if you're getting overwhelmed, maybe start at a smaller number, right? That's just intuition. But for me, I think you want to be very strategic with your time when you are looking at for sale by owner and when you're looking at expireds. So in your particular, if I may ask another just follow-up question, in your particular areas, what's the real reason that you feel like a lot of these particular, like who's your client avatar, that why have these homes not sold and why have they been withdrawn?
I'm sure. I mean, I'm assuming they're probably for similar reasons, either overpriced, poorly presented, bad conditioned homes that were overpriced to begin with. And so the idea would be to, hit them up, see if they're interested in selling, probably finding out they don't have cash to make improvements, and then of course crossing that with concierge and trying to do, which is something I do well, which is help properties get prepared for sale, and using that angle instead of just like, hey, I want to sell your house, versus taking on, hey, I will get your house ready and we're going to make a lot more money together.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. I think it's a great strategy. How have the calls been going so far?
Well, that's kind of, I'm transitioning to doing this. I've been in the business for a while. And when I first started working for an agent, all they did was call for sale by owners and expireds, and we would use old records. I think I'm just trying to figure out what is the best use of my time realistically, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to put in 8 hours a day doing this. And so I was just wondering if there was, I guess, a recommendation as to how to start, so as to
Sure.
actually not get discouraged and then give up, because the amount of information between this month and 3 years ago, there's a lot of data. I'm in LA, so there's a lot of areas, but also not not an overwhelming amount of inventory that falls in this criteria. So I guess that kind of answers the question, really.
It does, and I think it gives me more context to give you hopefully a better answer. And the answers that I would give you is and this is my style, so take this with a grain of salt.
Sure.
You're gonna want to put no more than about 10 to 20% of your time and effort into this. This is sort of like a layering option on top of that. Also, you want to
Exactly.
look at how you're capitalized, because if you have specific areas that you want to focus on, and areas that you know well or plan to know well, then I would say you can layer that on top of on what you're doing just from your SOI based marketing and your event based marketing and things like that. Because with concierge you do have a competitive advantage, and I think it behooves you to let people know that. But as far as your direct outreach to homes that have been either withdrawn or expired or whatnot, I would say maybe 10 to 20% of your time, and I would look at what you're budgeting, and really just make sure that you're not over indexing on that one particular strategy, unless that is, in my experience, the agents that have built businesses off of this strategy, that's all they do. That's what they focus on almost primarily. So just
Understood.
if you're getting into it, that would be my initial recommendation, is kind of use this as a kind of a layering on top of what your core business is coming from.
Thank you so much for that. And if I could just ask just one more follow-up question. Is
Yeah.
there a template for a spreadsheet that you have for even just like being able to input data? So I've found out that I could export obviously like agent detail records, MLS sheets for each property, but I can export the public record detail into a CSV file, which I can then import into, say, Google Sheets and mail merge or whatever, and create letters for that. And maybe I'm overthinking this, but is there like a base template for like columns in terms of the data that I really need and should be with tracking versus too much information on there?
I'm gonna punt that. Anybody in the local LA market that's familiar with the MLSs? If not,
Well,
I
it
will get
doesn't
back
even,
to you on that,
I
Henry.
don't even think it's specific to like the LA market. It's just like, if you're collecting data, you're storing it somewhere so you can then deploy it either by following up or by sending things. I'm just looking for a template of a Google sheet that people are using to organize their records, because you have new records and then you have, say, 3-year-old records. Is there a template to then just start adding to that, and that becomes your basis for your work for that particular effort?
Does anybody have anything to help Henry out?
Hey, Henry, this is Lee. I was going to jump in real quick. So I'm kind of doing the same thing as you, and getting some of these old expireds, and I'm starting to print them out. And then if I really can catch them or start dripping on them, maybe sending out stuff to their actual home address, if that's not the address, putting them into the CRM and tagging them that way.
Okay, so
I'm printing them.
Okay, so you don't necessarily put them into the CRM until you've made contact or worthy of a follow-up either by mail or email.
I think so, because some of these people may not want to hear from you or whatever.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Conversely to that, Henry, you also, I think just, or at least maybe tangentially to what Lee's saying, you can just take that CSV file, upload it, but just before you upload it, tag it appropriately so that every upload only apply, like it only shows that these are for your, your expired campaign or your FSBO campaign or whatever the case may be. Just
That makes sense.
as long as it's clean in your CRM, it would be my
Yes.
only.
What that would be my thing is I'm actually, that's why I'm using Google Sheets versus say the CRM, so as to not intermingle them and just literally have a, we'll call it offsite database on Google that is just specifically expired withdrawn contacts. And I actually someone just as something I came up with the other day with a person on Fiverr is I did create a Google Sheet and I put in their reminder date, because if you have a call with someone and you say, hey, I'll call you in 2 months, how do you track that, right? Well, it's not that easy. You'd think you could just create a Google Calendar event to remind you, but I just paid someone $20 and they wrote a script for me that will take an edit to a Google Sheet and automatically create a Google Calendar event. So when almost similar to what a CRM does. So if anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to share that script that you can apply to a Google Sheet, which will, automate some of this process for you.
And I think that's a great ad. My only last question, then we'll move on if that's all right, Henry, is
Sure.
just what is your, like, it seems like you're taking a lot of effort to make sure that they're not in your CRM. What's the reasoning behind that? Why wouldn't you just CRM?
I think because I get a little overwhelmed with when you have all those records in there and then trying to separate when you go to like send an email out or something, you only want to get a certain, I guess the tagging is what's going to help keep that separate, but I'm assuming it's going to add up to a large number of people, especially if you start including just outside prospecting to, a farm area. But I guess that probably requires being in its own separate database, and it's just.
Yeah, if you want, Henry, and this is totally optional, just ping me and we can put 15 minutes on the calendar. I can take a look. We can screen share what you have and how you're set up in your CRM, and I'll give you my 2 cents on.
That's awesome.
There.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I'm overthinking it just as I'm trying to set something up in the frustration of things getting a little slow and trying to go back to like, okay, what else can I do to stimulate some activity my way? This is how I did it when I first got into the business a long time ago, and haven't had to rely upon as much proactive efforts, but this is what we got to do.
Sure, absolutely. Now, yeah, we'll let me table that. You got me going, and my wheels are turning. But let me just see if there's any other questions that are out there. But thank you, Henry. I appreciate that. Thank you for joining us, Miss Sutton. Meg, good to see you. Shanna, good to see you as well. Shana, excuse me. Gabriel, good to see you. Any questions out there? Or are we going back to FSBOs and expireds with Henry?
So Stephen, I have a little bit of a question.
Sure.
So I was talking to my title rep about farming, and my title rep was like, start out small, and I just wanted to throw it back at you. What do you suggest on farming an area? Like, what's your suggestion?
Sure. With regards to the most effective way I've seen it done?
Yeah.
So for me, I think when looking at those who have been most successful in farming, it really takes consistency. The biggest trap that I see realtors fall into is that they'll spend money on mailers, but it'll be inconsistent. They'll give it a couple of tries. And really the way that I've seen it done best is when you are consistently telling a story that involves that local neighborhood, right? So people see your circulars, then they see your just solds, then they see your open houses, then they see, and it's like a consistent outreach as far as mailers go. And if you're capitalized to do that, then it's a great strategy. It does work even to this day, but it does take time and it does take a lot of money.
No, I'm not talking about mailers. I'm talking about.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, phone calls.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as
budget for me right at the moment either. Sure. I think mailers are just tossers actually. Like, I mean, I toss all the mailers that I get. So yeah.
It wouldn't be my first go-to strategy, but I would be remiss to say it does not work, because it does. It requires certain components, right? But thank you for correcting me there, and I apologize. So as far as farming goes with regards to over the phone, starting small, for me, I would more start strategic rather than small, and not just to make that word play. What I mean is,
Yeah.
I would look at, okay, where are my areas that I want to concentrate on geographically? Who do I know in those areas? How can I facilitate interactions 1, 2, 3 degrees of separation away from the people that I know? So whether that is, I've got an open house, I do an event, for me, I've always been someone who I'm a little uncomfortable just calling people just for the sake of calling people. So I love to call people for a reason. And usually that reason is some kind of event. The event could be something as small as, hey, we're going to grab a glass of wine, I know we have a mutual friend, etc. Or it could be as large as, hey, I'm hosting, a dog park event in your local neighborhood. I'd love to invite you. There's going to be coffee and scones or whatever, and treats for the dogs and whatnot. Come on by. So that would be my recommendation, because ultimately, you want to be able to make each call have the greatest amount of efficacy. And usually most calls stop when people think that you're soliciting them, and they think that when you can't make a very clear connection as to why you're calling them. So if you can say, I'm calling you because I just spoke to Jennifer, who lives 2 doors down, and she said this about you, I still want to know why you're calling me right now. But at the same time, I'm not afraid that you're calling me. I understand that we're all connected somehow. And then you say, I wanted to invite you to, an event upcoming or something. And it's like, oh, wow, that's really nice of you. I'd love to be there, or I can't make it, or whatever. But at least you induce some form of reciprocity where if they can't make it, you can follow up and you can say, hey, I'm so sorry we missed you. And it just gives you more points of contact, but there's a reason behind it. Does that help at all?
No, 1000%. I really agree.
Okay.
I mean, we all hate solicitation calls. I mean, that's why we don't answer them.
The hardest part I've found when it comes to farming is doing the homework, right? And that's 99% of the battle. And that's the battle that almost nobody in sales fights. And that's why, there's so many people that only that don't do well. And there's a couple of people that do extremely well. And it usually just comes down to really knowing who you're talking to ahead of time. I've found that, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, if you've ever looked at that, it gives a ton of great information about, what someone's interested in, who they're connected to, who they know, et cetera. And every once in a while, you may fall on your face if you call somebody and you're like, hey, I see, John, I know John. Who the hell's John? Oops. Well, I guess I thought you guys knew each other because you work together and whatever. Yeah, there's 1,000 people at that company. I don't know John. Okay, cool. Well, my bad. Right. But like, it gives you some context. Then you can check social media. You can see what they're into. And those are the things that I usually find help me before I make a phone call, just so that I have some basis, some context for that call. The other thing that I think is interesting is when you can, and tell me if I'm going off the rails here, have you thought through what your campaigns are going to be when you think about farming?
Great question.
Thank you. Do you know what I mean when I say campaigns, Denise?
Do you mean like, what do you mean by campaign? Like, do you mean
that's perfectly okay. And I'm sure there's others on the call who are like, the hell's he talking about? And that's why I said it. So campaigns are going to be, general themes. And then those are going to be things that I would track in your CRM and tag so that you can gauge efficacy down the road. So an example of a theme would be a reconnection campaign. These are all people I'm calling. And in that call, the whole point is, it's been too long. I haven't seen you. I want to reconnect, right? There's also like a newsletter campaign. Newsletter campaign is, hey, so great. And usually they can follow after one campaign has gone through. You can pick up another campaign, but like a newsletter campaign would be, hey, I'm putting together this newsletter. I've been putting together this newsletter. I'm trying to make it as good as it can be. I really want to get your feedback. Like, one, do you read it? If not, why not? Right. And what could I put in there that you would find interesting? Right. And it just shows that you care. It shows that you're interested. It shows that you want to build that back and forth. And that gives you an opportunity to really, to show value, where if somebody says, you know what, I'd love to know what the heck is going on with the local ordinance of what they're trying to pass with this bill. You go do some research, find out, put that in your newsletter. And then when you send out the newsletter, you can even say, hey, check out the most recent edition. I think you're going to find some really interesting information, right? So it gives you an opportunity to solve a problem. And so each of those types of calls tend to be batched in campaigns. And, you know, obviously there can be an event campaign, there can be a client appreciation campaign. It's just the theme around why you're calling.
Okay.
It helps me when I'm making calls, if I don't have to reinvent the wheel, if I can just kind of have a very similar conversation over and over and over again, but like not forever, just, you know, within a certain week or 2 weeks, this is what I'm calling about, and then move on. Go ahead.
Stephen, the LinkedIn Sales Navigator, is that a paid for upgrade?
It is.
Does that provide phone numbers?
It does not.
Okay, but you can reach people directly through LinkedIn?
You can message them, and what I found to be successful, very, very much just like bulk messaging, less is more. So what you'll find is, especially, you know, I'm sure you've already seen this already, but there will be people that show up in InMail all the time, and they've got this long paragraph of like what they're trying to sell you about, whatever. What I've found to be successful is I will reach out to someone based on, you know, how we know each other or whatever. And I can even say something as vague as, you know, hey, like if I know them, for example, like, oh my gosh, you came to mind and I lost your number. What is your number? Right. If I don't know them, I can say like, was just chatting with Henry. You know, he said great things about you. If you have a quick minute, here's the best number to reach me. I just would love to have a short call. Right now, obviously that takes the extra step of actually talking to Henry, because you don't want to, you know, be found out that, you know, that person goes, do you know this guy? And Henry's like, yeah, I love that guy, but no, he didn't talk to me. And then you're already starting out in the negative. So that's kind of, it's a little extra work. But again, I found that if I just have those core components, I go a lot further in my phone calls, you know, get a lot faster.
And at least you're direct messaging them, you're getting right to them.
Yes.
If they're looking at their emails through LinkedIn.
Yeah. And again, I think it also, for me, I'm just trying to build up points here, right? Like if I reach out to you via email and LinkedIn and, you know, other respectful ways, then I can turn you on the phone pretty fast. Cause I can say, look, before you get all excited. Okay. I know you're at work. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm trying to help you. And I've gone through all these appropriate channels. Like, you tell me, what would you like me to do at this point? Right. Like, and then they might tell you to go F off, or they might say, okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Like, how can I, what do you want? Right. Great. I just want 5 minutes of your time. When's a good time? We'll chat. This is only going to be helpful to you. If it's not, you know, I'll share some good information, things about your house stuff, you know, that I think is valuable, and we'll move on. Like, no harm, no foul. So that's just my experience.
I think Steven's point about LinkedIn is like spot on. Like I just got into LinkedIn recently. I mean, back on, and I paid that extra, like, what is it, Steven? Like $25 a month or something. And
So.
a bunch of people messaged me, and Compass people and a bunch of other people, like, you know, how you're like second to third people, and asked. So I've made a ton of connections. So.
Thank you for that, Denise. I'm also gonna, you know, I'm gonna talk out of two sides of my mouth here, because the Compass CRM is the only CRM you should use. That is the
Yeah.
However, the LinkedIn Sales Navigator kind of is trying to break into the CRM space, so they make it very easy for you to take notes, and it tracks activity and things like that. So, and make lead lists. So it is another area just in my world that I am able to kind of keep things separate, but also organized. And that's been helpful as well.
Spot on.
Thanks, guys.
All right. You need me?
Any other questions?
Okay.
No? Okay, well then I have a question. How many folks, just by a show of hands here, have actually gone through and used the activity forecast and then made this? Well, let me back up. 2-part question. How many of you actually have done the exercise of the activity forecast where you've planned out what you're going to do and who you're going to reach out to specifically in your quarter? And I can see you on camera, so just raise your hand and probably the easiest. No?
Wait, you froze. What did you say? What was that last part?
Sorry about that. So when I say the activity forecast, remember that color spreadsheet thing? Did you see that? Have you sat down and I don't care if you use my spreadsheet or not, but have you sat down and said, okay, these are the people that I'm going to contact over the next quarter?
Oh, I have.
You have. Amazing. Cool.
Yeah.
And then Keith, looks like you have as well. Lee, looks like you as well. May, have you done that?
Yes,
Great job. Great job. Shanna, how about you?
I did, but a little bit more on a short course, but I do have a list of specific groups and list of people. I kind of go through that pretty much every day. Following through the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Beautiful.
Fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then of the same group, how many of you, this is the second part of the question, how many of you made the jump where you put all of that, specific information of who you're going to contact for coffee or for an event or for email marketing or whatever, put that into the Compass CRM vis-a-vis tasks or
Yeah,
action
I do.
plans?
Yeah.
You did. Okay.
Follow through every day CRM. Yeah.
Okay, great. Keith, how about you? No, he's like, I'm doing 4 other things right now. I'm not
There
even.
we go. I couldn't get to the unmute button. I haven't put them in there. I have a different app that I use that's a rotating
Okay.
checklist for me. And so I put it in a different spot.
All right. Well,
But-
what do you use? We're all trying to get better. What do you use?
So for that, I use, let me pull up the app here. It's called, what is the app called? Todoist or To-Do List or To-Do. It's just called To-Do. It's got blue check mark with To-Do.
Great name.
And
Oh,
right? And it allows me to cycle things and actually put things on repeat so that, when do I hit this person with that thing or so on and so forth.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing. Everybody else, you're in the CRM. It's all done. Now, I guess my last question for you would be, would it have been valuable had all of that been done for you? Like if you, I guess what I'm trying to figure out, and this is just for my own, personal curiosities, is there an opportunity where, what I've found in working with clients one-on-one is that becomes a very time-consuming activity to put all of the names, et cetera, into your CRM. It's not as time consuming to decide who you want to talk to, but it is time consuming to physically put them in there. And obviously I know I'm only talking to a few folks here, so, I'm not going to, I'll take it with a grain of salt, like I said, but how many people found that to be a relatively easy activity? Let's just put it that way, to put it into the Compass CRM.
question
Yes.
so you retain a third-party service to synchronize with our Compass CRM for us. Is that the question? I'm not quite.
I'm trying to figure out, and again, this is just for my own curiosities. I'm trying to figure out if it would be of value to agents to be able to sit down with someone and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm thinking conceptually. These are the events I'd love to do. And then go through the list of their contacts and say, these are the people that I mean to contact, and this is how I want to contact. So basically sitting down with them and doing the activity forecast, but then saying, okay, the rest, we'll take it from here. And tomorrow morning, next week, whatever time frame, you're going to open up your Compass app and everything will be in there for you.
Ah, I see. Just speaking for myself, and I don't think that will be effective for me because I kind of micromanaging. So the easy example is like when you retain a transaction coordinator for your closing process. It
Yep.
seems like I always are one step ahead of time. So I developed kind of my own frustration that it's not timely, not satisfying. So for me, probably not, because I hand on my CRM all day long.
Perfect. That's great feedback. Thank you. What about everybody else? And then we'll jump because we're at 11:30 here, or I guess 2:30.
My CRM needs to be cleaned up.
Okay.
Yeah, to be honest. But my sphere is where I do a lot of calling though. So I've been trying to get addresses and stuff like that because I've been told that most likely is definitely where you should call from. So I've been trying to get addresses from my sphere. So
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Denise. Go ahead, Keith.
I love the idea. I really do. I love the idea because if I can get it off of my plate and out of my mind and it can be done and then the task list is there, I get it. I love that. And I use the task list all the time for other parts of our business.
Sure.
So it's simply for connecting with people because this is the thing that's on my constantly. I'm like, all right, this is where I'm using it. I think it actually could be effective. And I think that's what most agents look for is like, okay, how do I turn it over? And how do I automate the system?
Sure.
I think that as an agent, I need to know how it works.
Yeah.
I need to know how I need to go through the process somewhat so that I'm not just relying on the system. That's me as a broker. I can tell you my team, they would be like, cool, you did it for me, which I do everything for them. So, just going to be real. Like they would be like, awesome, it's done. Me, I'm like, I want to know how it works. I want to know why it works. I want to know what doesn't work. And then the parts of the automation that I need to do, I have to realize are part of the automation.
Got it. Okay. No, that's great feedback too. Okay, cool. Yeah, because I think the problem I'm hoping to solve is, and this won't be a one size fits all, but like you say, that the technology, I mean, Compass has spent millions and millions of dollars to make this very intuitive and user-friendly and quick and efficient. And it is, in my mind, those things. But then again, I've also kind of grown up with the tools from when they didn't work, frankly, to where they are now. And so, it's kind of like, it just makes sense to me. That said, though, I've heard the frustrations of a lot of agents who've moved over from other brokerages, and they're like, I've been here for 6 months and I've been here for a year. I'm busy. I have a lot going on. I got a team. So yeah, my CRM is still a mess, right? That kind of a thing. And I just think that there might be an opportunity there where we can do a little bit better and get people kind of up and running a little bit faster.
Ours would have been a mess completely, except for we purposed it. It was absolutely on purpose. So we took 45 days and just made everything the first 45 days from day 1 till day 45. All we did was organize and make it learn Compass.
And I remember you told me that. I thought that was pretty remarkable because I could probably count on like one hand how many agents I've met that have taken that time and done that.
This is the only thing that I told you, like, this is the only app that I use because it works for me, because it's something I used before Compass. It's something I used before real estate. The only thing that's like the only reason I use this app because it works for me to stay in contact with people.
Sure.
If I could, and I use it it's not just here, it's for every area of my life. So I've kept it there.
Well, God forbid that app ever goes anywhere, because then I'm just going to be able to hear you from there. You're just going to be like, no,
right? Should have developed one. That's one.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I appreciate your commitment. And if I can be helpful to you in any way, like Henry, as I mentioned, the same goes for all of you. If you have a question, send me an email. Happy to help.
Thank you, as always.
You got it.
Mhm.